Step away from the vehicle right now." The words cut through the cold Texas rain like a blade, sharp enough to make every customer at the gas station turn their head at once. Red and blue lights flashed across the wet concrete, painting the puddles beneath the pumps in nervous colors while Vanessa Brooks stood frozen beside a dark gray SUV, one hand still clutching a small white pharmacy bag against her chest. Rainwater dripped from the edge of her hood onto her cheeks, but she didn't wipe it away. She looked exhausted, the kind of tired that sat deep behind the eyes after too many sleepless nights, yet her voice stayed calm when she answered. "Officer, I was just trying to get home." But Officer Daniel Reeves wasn't listening anymore. His boots splashed through the puddles as he approached the SUV, flashlight beams sliding across the government plates mounted on the back. The gas station smelled like gasoline, wet asphalt, and burned coffee from inside the convenience store. Somewhere near pump number 4, country music crackled faintly from an old pickup truck while a teenage cashier pressed both hands against the window, watching everything unfold like free entertainment. Vanessa slowly lowered the pharmacy bag onto the hood of the SUV as instructed. Her fingers lingered on it for half a second too long, and Reeves immediately noticed. "Keep your hands where I can see them," he snapped. Several people nearby pulled out their phones. One man muttered something under his breath. Another customer shook his head as if he had already decided what kind of story this was. Vanessa inhaled carefully, trying to steady herself while cold rain soaked through the sleeves of her sweatshirt. The bright overhead gas station lights reflected off the wet pavement around her, making the entire scene feel unreal, almost staged, except for the trembling in her hands. "Sir," she said quietly, "there's medication in that bag that needs to stay dry." Reeves ignored her. His attention stayed fixed on the SUV. "You're telling me this vehicle belongs to you?" Vanessa nodded once. "It belongs to my family." Reeves gave a short laugh that carried no humor at all. "A vehicle with Pentagon registration?" The question hung in the air long enough for the people recording on their phones to exchange looks. Vanessa could feel every eye on her now. The cashier inside the store had stepped outside beneath the awning to get a better view. A woman standing near the ice machine whispered to her boyfriend while staring openly at Vanessa's face. Rain tapped against the metal roof overhead in a steady rhythm. "I don't think you understand," Reeves continued, lowering his flashlight slightly. "Vehicles like this don't just end up at random gas stations after midnight." Vanessa swallowed hard. Her voice remained soft. "I stopped because my GPS rerouted me around construction on I-35. My son's medication needed to be picked up before the pharmacy closed." Reeves looked toward the white bag on the hood. "Your son?" "Yes." "Where is he?" Vanessa glanced toward the SUV. "Sleeping in the back seat." Reeves stepped closer immediately. "Open the vehicle." Vanessa hesitated, not out of defiance but fear of waking the little boy inside after the difficult week he'd already had. That pause lasted maybe 2 seconds, but in tense moments 2 seconds can feel like a confession. Reeves stiffened. "Now." Vanessa reached slowly into her pocket for the key fob. The rain intensified suddenly, drumming harder against the pumps and windshield glass while distant thunder rolled across the dark highway beyond the station. The SUV unlocked with a soft beep. Reeves opened the rear passenger door and shined his flashlight inside. A small child lay asleep beneath a navy blue blanket, tiny chest rising and falling peacefully despite the chaos outside. Beside him sat an inhaler and a stuffed brown bear with one stitched eye missing. Reeves studied the interior carefully, his suspicion only deepening instead of fading. The leather seats. The military parking sticker near the windshield. The neatly folded uniform jacket hanging behind the driver's seat. Vanessa watched him silently. She already knew how this looked to people who had decided who she was before hearing her speak. The gas station manager finally stepped outside, arms folded tightly across his chest. Ethan Cole had called the police 20 minutes earlier after noticing Vanessa sitting in the SUV while speaking on the phone. In his mind, something about her presence near an expensive government vehicle had felt off. Now he stood beneath the fluorescent lights with a satisfied expression spreading slowly across his face. "That's her," Ethan said loudly enough for everyone nearby to hear. "I told dispatch she was acting suspicious." Vanessa turned toward him. "I bought gas here 3 times this month." Ethan shrugged. "Didn't recognize you." Reeves reached toward the front seat and picked up an identification badge attached to a black lanyard. Vanessa's heart tightened instantly. "Officer, please be careful with that." Reeves examined the badge beneath the flashlight beam. Rainwater rolled off the brim of his hat while his jaw slowly hardened. "You expect me to believe this belongs to you?" Vanessa stared at him, not angry, not loud, just tired in a way that felt heavier than the storm around them. "Yes," she answered softly. A long silence followed. Then Reeves reached for his radio. "Dispatch, I'm gonna need verification on a possible unauthorized government vehicle." Somewhere in the distance, another siren began approaching through the rain. The second patrol car rolled into the gas station with its headlights cutting through the rain like pale knives across the black pavement. Water streamed along the edges of the concrete islands beneath the pumps while Officer Daniel Reeves stood beside the SUV with Vanessa Brooks still facing the hood in silence. Her wet sweatshirt clung to her arms from the cold, but she kept glancing toward the back seat where the little boy remained asleep beneath the blanket. The flashing lights painted soft red streaks across the side windows of the vehicle, and every few seconds thunder rumbled low across the Texas sky. The younger officer stepping out of the second patrol car looked barely 30. Officer Kevin Morales adjusted his rain jacket and immediately noticed the phones recording from every angle around the station. "What do we have?" he asked quietly as he approached. Reeves held up the identification badge he had found inside the SUV. "Possible unauthorized possession of a restricted federal vehicle." Morales looked toward Vanessa for the first time. She did not look dangerous. She looked tired. There was a difference, but Reeves no longer seemed interested in seeing it. Vanessa folded her arms against the cold wind and spoke softly. "My son is sleeping in the back seat. He has asthma. I only stopped here because the pharmacy near base closed early." Reeves ignored the explanation again. He had already built the story in his head, and now every detail simply fed it. Ethan Cole lingered near the entrance of the convenience store with his coffee cup still in hand, enjoying the attention spreading through the station. "She sat out here almost 20 minutes before going inside," Ethan added loudly. "Kept making calls. Looking around." Vanessa turned toward him slowly. Rainwater dripped from her eyelashes. "I was calling the pediatric clinic because my son had a fever." Ethan shrugged without apology. "I did what I thought was right." A pickup truck pulled beside Pump 6, but the driver stayed inside watching the scene through fogged windows. More people gathered beneath the awning to stay dry while recording on their phones. Vanessa could feel their eyes following every movement she made. It was a feeling she had known since childhood. The feeling of entering a room where people decided who you were before hearing your voice. Reeves stepped closer again. "I need you to tell me exactly how you got access to this vehicle." Vanessa looked directly at him for the first time. Her voice stayed steady even though her fingers trembled from the rain. "My husband authorized me to use it." Reeves almost smiled at that answer, but not kindly. "And what does your husband do?" Vanessa paused. Not because she was hiding anything, but because she already understood what would happen the moment she answered. She had spent years avoiding conversations that changed the way strangers looked at her. Power always made people suddenly polite. She hated that. "He works for the military," she said finally. Reeves let out a short breath through his nose. "That is not specific enough." Vanessa glanced toward the SUV again. "Officer, can I please check on my son first?" Reeves stepped sideways, blocking the door without thinking. "Not yet." The words landed harder than he intended. For a second, even Morales looked uncomfortable. Rain hammered the metal roof overhead while the bright fluorescent lights buzzed softly above the pumps. Vanessa lowered her eyes and nodded once. She did not argue. That somehow unsettled Morales more than anger would have. Most people raised their voices when embarrassed in public. Vanessa only became quieter. Reeves handed the identification badge to Morales. "Run this." Morales wiped rain from the plastic surface and studied the card carefully. The photo matched Vanessa perfectly. The badge carried military medical credentials and federal access markings he recognized immediately from previous assignments near Fort Cavazos. His expression changed slightly. "This looks real," he murmured. Reeves crossed his arms. "Fake credentials are not hard to make anymore." Morales looked uncertain. "Still, we should verify before escalating." Reeves glanced around at the growing crowd. "That is exactly what I am doing." Inside the SUV, the little boy suddenly coughed in his sleep. Vanessa reacted instantly, turning toward the sound with panic flashing briefly across her face for the first time all night. "Please," she said softly, "he needs his inhaler nearby." Reeves opened the rear door wider and looked inside again. The child stirred beneath the blanket, cheeks flushed with fever beneath the pale interior lighting. The stuffed bear had fallen onto the floorboard beside a pair of tiny sneakers. Morales noticed an empty juice bottle and children's medicine on the seat beside him. None of it matched the image of a stolen government vehicle operation Reeves seemed convinced they had interrupted. Vanessa took one careful step forward. Reeves immediately raised his hand. "Stay back." The movement stopped her cold. Water rolled down the side of the SUV while the storm deepened overhead. Somewhere nearby, a diesel truck engine growled past on the highway. Vanessa closed her eyes briefly as if fighting exhaustion itself. Then she spoke in the calm voice of someone used to comforting frightened people. "Officer, my son spent 3 days in the hospital last winter because somebody assumed he was exaggerating his breathing problems. I am not trying to cause trouble. I just need to get him home." Morales looked at Reeves again. "Maybe we should let her sit inside with the kid while dispatch verifies everything." Reeves did not answer immediately. His radio crackled softly at his shoulder, filling the silence with static. The customers recording nearby leaned closer beneath the awning, waiting for the next moment like viewers watching a live show they had already chosen sides in. Then dispatch finally answered through the radio speaker. "Unit 12, we are attempting verification now. Stand by." Federal registration pinged restricted access channels. Reeves straightened slightly at the words. Morales frowned. Vanessa remained still beneath the rain, arms folded tightly against the cold while red and blue reflections shimmered across the water collecting around her shoes. The rain finally began to slow, but the tension hanging over the gas station only grew heavier. Water dripped steadily from the edge of the metal awning while Officer Daniel Reeves stood beside the SUV with his jaw tight, eyes fixed on Vanessa Brooks like he was waiting for her story to crack apart. The flashing lights from both patrol cars reflected across the wet pavement and glass windows, turning the quiet station into something cold and unreal in the middle of the empty Texas highway. Vanessa wrapped her arms closer around herself, trying to hold onto warmth while the damp night air pushed through her soaked clothes. Her son shifted again in the back seat, coughing softly in his sleep before settling beneath the navy blanket. Officer Kevin Morales looked toward the child with concern that he could not fully hide anymore. "Dispatch is still verifying," he said carefully. Reeves barely nodded. His attention remained locked on Vanessa. "You still have not told me exactly what your husband does." Vanessa looked down for a moment at the water gathering near her shoes. She seemed less afraid than exhausted, like someone carrying too much weight for too many years without complaint. "He works at the Pentagon," she answered quietly. The nearby crowd reacted instantly. One teenager lowered his phone and laughed under his breath. Ethan Cole folded his arms tighter across his chest beside the convenience store door. "Sure he does," he muttered. Reeves stepped closer again, the beam of his flashlight brushing across Vanessa's face. "Do you understand how many people try using military stories to avoid trouble?" Vanessa nodded slowly. "Yes." "Then help me understand why a woman standing alone at a gas station after midnight is driving a federally registered vehicle connected to restricted channels." The question was not really a question anymore. It was an accusation disguised as procedure. Vanessa could hear it clearly. Morales could too. She inhaled slowly before answering. Because my family lives on base. Reeves stared at her in silence for a few seconds while rainwater rolled off the brim of his hat. The sound of trucks passing on the highway echoed faintly through the darkness beyond the station. Somewhere inside the convenience store, the microwave beeped and country music continued playing low through old ceiling speakers, absurdly normal against the storm building outside. Step away from the vehicle again, Reeves ordered. Vanessa obeyed immediately. She moved carefully, making sure not to wake her son. Her calmness unsettled Reeves more than anger would have. He was used to arguments, excuses, shouting. Vanessa offered none of it. Only quiet answers and tired eyes. Morales walked around the SUV with the identification badge still in his hand. The federal markings continued bothering him. He had seen credentials like these before near military medical facilities, and fake copies rarely looked this precise. He glanced through the windshield and noticed folders stacked neatly on the passenger seat beside a pair of reading glasses. One folder had partially opened during the search, exposing papers stamped with military medical insignias and counseling notes. Nothing about the inside of the vehicle suggested criminal activity. Everything suggested a parent rushing home after a difficult day. Morales lowered his voice when he spoke to Reeves again. I think we should slow this down. Reeves looked irritated immediately. Slow what down? This. Morales gestured toward the crowd recording nearby. If dispatch comes back clean, this is going to become a problem. Reeves glanced around at the phones pointed toward them from beneath the awning. His expression hardened instead of softening. Pride had already entered the situation, and pride rarely backed away quietly. Ethan suddenly stepped closer from the store entrance. Officer, she was sitting out here talking on the phone for almost half an hour before I called. Vanessa looked at him calmly. I was trying to reach my husband. Ethan shrugged. You looked nervous. Vanessa almost smiled then, but it was the kind of smile people make when disappointment has become familiar. Most mothers look nervous when their child has a fever. Ethan opened his mouth to answer, but Morales interrupted first. Sir, let us handle this. Ethan stepped back reluctantly. The radio on Reeves's shoulder crackled again with bursts of static before dispatch returned. Unit 12, Federal Registration confirms vehicle assignment through Pentagon authorization. Additional verification pending. Stand by. Morales exhaled quietly. Reeves said nothing. The words should have eased the situation, but instead they deepened the strange silence settling over the station. Vanessa closed her eyes briefly, rain dripping from her hood onto the pavement below. She looked like she wanted nothing more than to disappear into the night with her son and leave the humiliation behind her. A cold gust of wind swept across the pumps, carrying the smell of diesel fuel and wet dirt from the highway. The little boy inside the SUV began coughing harder this time. Vanessa immediately turned toward the sound. Please, she said softly, almost pleading now. His inhaler is in the side pocket. Morales moved toward the rear door instinctively, but Reeves stopped him with one look. Not yet. Morales frowned. Daniel. Reeves lowered his voice sharply. We do not know who she really is. Vanessa heard every word. The crowd heard them too. One woman recording lowered her phone slightly, uncertainty beginning to replace entertainment on her face. Vanessa stared at the glowing patrol lights reflected in the puddles beneath her feet. Then she spoke so quietly that Reeves almost missed it. You already decided who I was the second you saw me. The words hung in the cold air longer than the thunder rolling across the distant highway. Reeves did not answer. For the first time all night, he looked away first. For several seconds, nobody moved. The rain softened into a cold mist drifting beneath the gas station lights while Vanessa Brooks stood beside the SUV with water clinging to the edges of her hood. Officer Daniel Reeves looked away from her words, but they stayed in the air between them like something heavier than the storm itself. You already decided who I was the second you saw me. The crowd beneath the awning had gone strangely quiet after hearing it. Even the people recording seemed less certain now. Officer Kevin Morales shifted uneasily near the rear passenger door, glancing between Reeves and the little boy sleeping inside the SUV. The child coughed again, rougher this time, followed by the faint sound of strained breathing. Vanessa heard it immediately. Her entire posture changed in an instant. The exhaustion disappeared behind a mother's instinct. "Please," she said, stepping forward carefully. "He needs his inhaler now." Reeves raised a hand automatically. "Stay where you are." Vanessa looked at him with disbelief that remained painfully calm. "Officer, he cannot breathe well when he gets overheated. The inhaler is right there in the side pocket." Morales leaned toward the open rear door and listened. The little boy's breathing had become uneven, shallow between coughs. "Daniel," Morales said quietly, "we should let her help him." Reeves hesitated. Pride and procedure wrestled silently across his face while the storm clouds drifted low over the highway beyond the station. The flashing patrol lights reflected across the child's pale face through the window glass. Vanessa clasped her trembling hands together to stop herself from pushing past them. "His name is Caleb," she said softly. "He is 7 years old. He spent last winter in intensive care because of an asthma attack." Her voice cracked slightly on the last words, but she steadied herself quickly. Reeves looked toward the boy inside the SUV. For the first time all night, uncertainty entered his expression. Then Caleb suddenly sat upright in the back seat, coughing harder, confused and frightened by the lights outside the vehicle. "Mom," he called weakly through the cracked door. Vanessa moved instinctively toward him. Reeves stepped sideways again, blocking her path without thinking. Caleb's frightened eyes widened immediately when he saw strangers surrounding the SUV. The little boy pressed himself against the seat, chest rising too quickly now. "Mom," he whispered again, struggling for air between coughs. Vanessa's composure nearly broke. "Please," she said. "Please let me get to my son." Morales no longer waited for permission. He opened the rear door fully and reached for the inhaler sitting beside the blanket. Caleb's small hand shook as he tried to breathe steadily. Morales handed the inhaler toward Vanessa, but Reeves caught his wrist halfway. "Hold on." Morales stared at him in disbelief. "Are you serious right now?" Reeves lowered his voice sharply. "We still do not know what this situation is." Vanessa watched the exchange with horror growing behind her eyes. "This is a child having trouble breathing," she said quietly. "That is what this situation is." Another wave of coughing hit Caleb before she could say more. Morales pulled his arm free and handed Vanessa the inhaler anyway. "Go ahead," he said gently. Vanessa immediately climbed halfway into the SUV and wrapped one arm carefully around Caleb's shoulders. Her movements became soft and practiced, the motions of someone who had done this many times before. "Slow breaths, baby," she whispered. "Just listen to mommy." Caleb clutched the inhaler while rain tapped lightly against the roof above them. The crowd recording nearby fell almost completely silent now. Ethan Cole shifted awkwardly near the store entrance, no longer looking as confident as before. Vanessa guided Caleb through several slow breaths until the panic in his eyes finally began easing. She brushed damp curls away from his forehead and checked his temperature with the back of her hand. Morales watched quietly from beside the door. "He has a fever?" Vanessa nodded. 102 before we left the clinic. "Where were you driving from?" Morales asked softly. "Fort Cavazos Military Hospital." Reeves remained near the front of the SUV with his arms folded tightly across his chest, but something about the scene had started changing around him. The certainty he carried earlier was beginning to crack beneath the weight of reality standing directly in front of him. Vanessa looked nothing like the criminal story he had imagined. She looked like a mother trying desperately to get her sick child home. Dispatch crackled through the radio again, louder this time against the quiet rain. "Unit 12, Federal Contact has requested immediate callback verification." "Repeat, immediate callback." Reeves grabbed the radio quickly. Copy. The dispatcher's voice lowered slightly. Sir, they are asking for badge numbers on scene. Morales looked up instantly. Reeves frowned. For what reason? A brief pause followed through the static. Sir, they did not specify. The atmosphere changed immediately. Even the customer's recording seemed to feel it. Reeves stepped several feet away toward his patrol car to answer privately while Morales remained near the SUV. Vanessa sat beside Caleb in the back seat now, holding him close beneath the blanket while the little boy slowly regained his breathing rhythm. The red and blue lights flickered softly across their faces. Morales glanced toward her military medical badge still resting in his hand. You work with military families, he asked carefully. Vanessa nodded once while smoothing Caleb's hair. Trauma counseling. Morales looked toward the frightened little boy pressed against her side. Then back toward the patrol car where Reeves stood speaking tensely into the radio beneath the rain. I think somebody important just got notified, Morales said quietly. Vanessa lowered her eyes for a moment. That is exactly what I was afraid of. Officer Daniel Reeves stood beside his patrol car with rainwater sliding down the side of his face while dispatch continued speaking through the radio clipped near his shoulder. His posture had changed completely. The confidence he carried earlier was gone, replaced by something tighter and uncertain. Repeat that, he said into the radio quietly. Static crackled back before the dispatcher answered again. Federal Operations requested confirmation of all officers currently on scene. Sir, they asked whether the vehicle occupants are secure. Reeves glanced toward the SUV immediately. Vanessa Brooks sat in the back seat beside Caleb with one arm wrapped around him beneath the blanket while the little boy rested weakly against her shoulder. The flashing lights reflected softly across the window glass, painting red and blue shadows over both their faces. Officer Kevin Morales noticed the change in Reeves before anyone else did. What did they say? Reeves lowered the radio slowly. Federal Operations is tracking the vehicle. Morales stared at him for a moment. Tracking it? Reeves nodded once. Apparently the SUV triggered a restricted security response when dispatch entered the registration. The word spread through the small crowd almost instantly. People exchanged nervous looks beneath the awning while several quietly lowered their phones. Ethan Cole swallowed hard near the convenience store door, his earlier confidence fading with every passing second. Vanessa overheard enough to understand what was happening. She closed her eyes briefly, exhausted disappointment crossing her face more than fear. I told you I was trying to avoid this, she said softly. Reeves looked toward her again, frustration building now that the situation no longer felt under his control. Then maybe you should have explained yourself clearly from the beginning. Vanessa looked at him with calm disbelief. Would you have listened? Reeves did not answer. The silence between them said enough. Caleb shifted weakly beneath the blanket and coughed again, smaller this time after using the inhaler. Vanessa gently rubbed circles against his back while checking his forehead once more. Morales leaned closer to the SUV. Does he need a hospital? Vanessa shook her head. He just needs rest and his antibiotics. Her voice softened further when she looked down at Caleb. He was finally sleeping before all this started. The little boy opened his eyes halfway and looked toward the patrol lights outside. Mom, he whispered weakly, are we in trouble? The question hit the entire scene harder than shouting ever could have. Vanessa immediately forced a small smile for him. No, baby, she said gently. Everything is okay. But the fear in Caleb's eyes remained. He looked toward the officers standing outside the SUV like he did not understand why strangers with flashing lights were surrounding his mother in the rain. Morales looked away uncomfortably. Reeves tightened his jaw. Another radio transmission burst suddenly through the silence. Unit 12, Federal Liaison requesting immediate visual confirmation on passenger identity. Reeves grabbed the radio again. Visual confirmation for what? A brief pause followed. Then the dispatcher answered carefully. Sir, they specifically asked if the female occupant is Vanessa Brooks. Reeves froze. Morales slowly turned toward Vanessa inside the SUV. Even Ethan Cole seemed to stop breathing for a second beneath the awning. Vanessa lowered her eyes. The rain had almost stopped now, leaving only water dripping from the gas station roof in slow, steady rhythms. Reeves stared at her through the open vehicle door. Who exactly is your husband? Vanessa hesitated again, not because she wanted secrecy anymore, but because she already understood what came next. The moment power entered the story, humanity usually disappeared. Suddenly people apologized. Suddenly people listened. Suddenly she became worthy of respect she should have received from the beginning. She hated that transformation every single time. His name is Marcus Brooks, she answered quietly. Morales recognized the name immediately. His expression shifted before he could hide it. Reeves noticed. You know him. Morales looked toward Reeves carefully. General Marcus Brooks. Reeves blinked once. The Fustar. Vanessa remained silent. That silence became the answer. The air beneath the gas station light seemed to change all at once. Ethan Cole's face lost color. One of the teenagers recording lowered his phone completely. Even the distant highway noise suddenly felt muted beneath the weight of realization settling over everyone present. Reeves stared at Vanessa as though seeing her clearly for the first time all night. Not because she had changed, but because his assumptions finally had. You are his wife? He asked slowly. Vanessa nodded once while adjusting the blanket around Caleb's shoulders. No anger. No triumph. Just exhaustion. Reeves took a step backward, visibly unsettled now. Why did you not say that earlier? Vanessa looked directly at him. Because my son should not need a four-star general standing beside him just to be treated fairly at a gas station. The words landed harder than the storm had. Morales lowered his eyes immediately. Reeves said nothing at all. Then a new sound emerged from the dark highway beyond the station. Deep engines. Multiple vehicles moving fast through the rain. Headlights appeared in the distance, bright and organized, cutting through the night in perfect formation. Every officer at the station turned toward the road instinctively. Ethan Cole whispered under his breath, "Oh my God." 3 black government SUVs approached the station entrance without slowing down. Their headlights reflected across the soaked pavement like white fire while the convoy rolled silently beneath the gas station lights. Reeves stood frozen beside his patrol car as the lead vehicle stopped only a few feet away from him. The engine idled low beneath the cold Texas night. Then all 4 doors opened at once. The engines continued humming beneath the gas station lights long after the black SUVs stopped moving. Rainwater dripped from the vehicles in steady streams, reflecting white against the soaked pavement while the entire station fell into complete silence. Nobody recorded anymore. Nobody whispered. Even the country music inside the convenience store suddenly sounded distant and small against the weight of what had just arrived. Officer Daniel Reeves stood motionless beside his patrol car, shoulders rigid beneath the flashing red and blue lights. Officer Kevin Morales slowly removed his hand from his belt and stepped backward instinctively as 4 men in dark suits exited the lead SUV with calm precision. None of them raised their voices. None of them moved aggressively. That somehow made the atmosphere even heavier. Their polished shoes crossed the wet concrete quietly while the mist drifted beneath the bright overhead lights. One of the men approached Reeves directly, rain beading across the shoulders of his black coat. "Officer Reeves," he asked calmly. Reeves swallowed once before answering. "Yes, sir." The man held up a federal identification badge briefly. "Department of Defense Security Liaison." Reeves nodded quickly. "We were in the process of verification." The man glanced past him toward the SUV where Vanessa Brooks sat beside Caleb beneath the blanket. His expression softened immediately. "Is Mrs. Brooks all right?" The question changed everything. Not because of power. Because it carried concern instead of suspicion. Vanessa looked up slowly from the back seat. Her face looked exhausted beneath the dim interior lighting. Damp curls rested against her cheeks while Caleb slept weakly against her shoulder again, finally breathing easier after the inhaler. For the first time all night, someone had asked if she was all right before asking who she belonged to. The federal agent walked toward the SUV carefully. "Mrs. Brooks," he said gently, "we are sorry for the delay." Vanessa gave a small tired nod. "My son just needs to get home." "Of course." The agent lowered his voice further after noticing Caleb asleep. "Medical support is standing by if needed." Vanessa glanced down at her son and brushed her fingers softly through his hair. "He will be okay." The mist hanging over the gas station drifted through the red and blue patrol lights, turning the entire parking lot into a haze of blurred colors and reflections. Ethan Cole remained frozen near the convenience store entrance, his coffee cup still in hand though the drink had gone cold long ago. He looked smaller now somehow. Less certain. Morales quietly stepped closer to Reeves. "This is getting serious." Reeves did not answer immediately. His eyes remained fixed on Vanessa inside the SUV. Only an hour earlier he had seen her as suspicious before hearing a single detail about her life. Now federal security teams were standing beneath the same gas station lights because of the way she had been treated. The realization settled heavily across his face. One of the agents opened a secure tablet beside the SUV and confirmed several details quietly with Vanessa. She answered politely despite the exhaustion in her voice. No anger. No threats. No demands. That unsettled Reeves more than anything else. He had expected outrage by now. Instead she kept focusing on Caleb, adjusting the blanket around him every few minutes while cold rainwater still clung to the sleeves of her sweatshirt. Morales noticed the red marks left across her wrists from where Reeves had held her earlier during the confusion. Vanessa kept pulling her sleeves lower to hide them whenever Caleb looked up. The little boy stirred weakly again. "Mom," he whispered sleepily. Vanessa immediately leaned closer. "I am right here, baby." Caleb blinked toward the flashing lights outside. "Are the police mad at us?" Vanessa's eyes closed briefly before she answered. "No, sweetheart. Everybody is just trying to figure things out." Reeves heard every word. Something inside him shifted uncomfortably at the sound of it. She could have humiliated him in front of everyone standing there. Instead she protected Caleb from fear even now. The federal agent finished speaking quietly into an earpiece before turning back toward Vanessa. "General Brooks is on a secure call line," he said softly. "Would you like to speak with him?" Vanessa hesitated for half a second before nodding. The agent handed her the phone carefully. She tucked part of the blanket around Caleb first so the boy would stay warm. Then she lifted the phone to her ear. Her entire expression softened instantly. "Hey," she whispered. The people standing nearby could not hear the voice on the other end, but they could hear the emotion suddenly breaking through her calm for the first time all night. Vanessa looked down at Caleb while speaking quietly. "He is okay now." A pause. Then her tired eyes filled slightly with tears she had been holding back for hours. "No, baby, do not come angry," she said softly into the phone. "Please." Reeves lowered his head immediately after hearing that. The rain had almost completely stopped now. Water continued dripping from the edges of the awning in slow rhythms while the cold Texas wind swept through the empty highway beyond the station. Nobody moved. Nobody spoke loudly anymore. The entire gas station felt suspended in one long breath. Vanessa listened silently for several seconds before answering again. "I know." Another pause. Then she looked briefly toward Reeves standing beneath the patrol lights. They thought they were doing their job. Reeves closed his eyes for a moment after hearing those words. Not because they excused him. Because they carried more grace than he deserved. Vanessa handed the secure phone back to the federal agent gently before pulling the blanket higher around Caleb's shoulders. The little boy had fallen asleep again against her chest. The flashing lights reflected softly across the wet pavement around the SUV while steam rose faintly from the hoods of the parked vehicles in the cold night air. Then far down the highway, another set of headlights appeared through the darkness, moving fast toward the station. The new headlights moved through the darkness faster than the others had, cutting long white lines across the wet highway before turning sharply into the gas station entrance. Every person standing beneath the awning watched in silence as a black sedan rolled to a smooth stop beside the government SUVs. Rainwater shimmered beneath the tires while the engine idled quietly in the cold night air. Nobody needed to ask who had arrived. The atmosphere itself seemed to tighten. Officer Daniel Reeves straightened instinctively beside his patrol car while Officer Kevin Morales stepped farther back from the SUV where Vanessa Brooks sat with Caleb asleep against her chest. The rear passenger door of the black sedan opened slowly. General Marcus Brooks stepped out beneath the gas station lights with calm measured movements that somehow carried more weight than shouting ever could. He wore a dark military overcoat over civilian clothes. And rain mist clung lightly to his shoulders as he closed the car door behind him. His eyes did not move toward the officers first. They moved directly to Vanessa and Caleb. The tension in his face softened immediately the moment he saw them safe inside the SUV. Vanessa looked at him through the open rear door, exhaustion washing across her features all at once now that he was finally there. Marcus crossed the wet pavement quietly while federal agents stepped aside without speaking. The only sounds were distant highway tires and water dripping steadily from the edge of the awning. Caleb stirred weakly beneath the blanket as Marcus reached the vehicle. "Hey buddy," he whispered gently, kneeling beside the open door. Caleb opened his tired eyes halfway. "Dad." Marcus smiled softly and touched the little boy's forehead with the back of his hand. "You hanging in there?" Caleb nodded weakly before resting against Vanessa again. Marcus looked toward his wife then. The silence between them carried years of understanding deeper than words. "You okay?" he asked quietly. Vanessa gave a tired nod, though her eyes told the truth more honestly than her voice ever could. Marcus noticed the damp sleeves covering her wrists. He noticed the exhaustion in her face. He noticed the fear Caleb had not fully let go of yet. But he kept his expression calm. Reeves watched the entire moment from several feet away beneath the flashing patrol lights, his stomach tightening more with every passing second. He had expected anger. Demands. Threats. Instead, the most powerful man standing at the station was kneeling beside his family in silence, focused only on whether his wife and son were warm enough. Marcus slowly stood and turned toward the officers. His face remained composed, but there was disappointment in his eyes heavy enough to quiet the entire gas station. "Which one of you stopped my wife?" Reeves stepped forward immediately. "Sir, I was conducting a routine verification after concerns were reported regarding the vehicle." Marcus looked at him steadily. "Routine?" Reeves swallowed once. "Yes, sir." Marcus glanced briefly toward Vanessa sitting quietly in the SUV. "Did she cooperate?" Reeves hesitated. "Yes, sir." "Did she answer your questions?" "Yes, sir." Marcus nodded once, almost to himself. Then he looked around at the crowd still standing beneath the awning, several phones lowered awkwardly now. "And despite all of that," Marcus said quietly, "my sick son ended up surrounded by patrol cars in the rain." Reeves opened his mouth but no words came out immediately. Morales lowered his eyes toward the pavement. Ethan Cole quietly slipped farther back toward the convenience store entrance like he wanted to disappear completely. Vanessa touched Marcus lightly on the sleeve before the silence could harden further. "Marcus," she said softly, "Caleb needs to get home." Marcus looked down at her instantly, the tension in his posture easing again. "Of course." One of the federal agents stepped forward with an umbrella, but Marcus waved it away without looking. Rain no longer mattered. He reached carefully into the SUV and lifted Caleb gently into his arms without waking him fully. The little boy rested against his father's shoulder beneath the oversized blanket while Marcus held him close against the cold wind. Reeves watched quietly as Vanessa stepped out of the SUV beside them. Her legs looked tired from standing so long in wet clothes. Marcus immediately removed his overcoat and draped it around her shoulders before saying another word. The gesture was simple, familiar, human. It somehow made the entire gas station feel even quieter. Vanessa pulled the coat closed against the cold and looked toward Reeves for a long moment. No anger sat in her expression now. Only sadness. "Officer," she said softly, "do you know what Caleb asked me a few minutes ago?" Reeves could barely answer. "No." Vanessa glanced toward her son sleeping against Marcus's shoulder. "He asked if the police were mad at us." The words hit Reeves harder than any accusation could have. Vanessa continued quietly. "He is 7 years old." Reeves lowered his eyes immediately. The flashing lights reflected off the wet pavement between them while cold wind swept through the empty gas station lot. Nobody recorded anymore. Nobody moved. Marcus looked toward Reeves with calm restraint that somehow made the shame worse instead of lighter. "My wife spent 10 years counseling military families after combat trauma," he said quietly. "Some of those families belong to police officers too." Reeves looked up slowly. Marcus nodded toward Vanessa. "There is a good chance she has spent more time helping frightened people than anyone else standing here tonight." Morales stared toward Vanessa in surprise. Reeves remained completely silent now. Vanessa looked at him one final time before speaking softly. "I just wanted to buy medicine for my son and go home." The mist drifted beneath the gas station lights while Marcus carried Caleb toward the black sedan. Vanessa followed slowly beside him with the oversized military coat wrapped around her shoulders. Behind them, Officer Daniel Reeves stood alone beneath the flashing red and blue lights, staring at the rainwater gathered around his boots like he no longer recognized the man standing inside the reflection. The cold wind drifted through the gas station parking lot as General Marcus Brooks carefully settled Caleb into the back seat of the black sedan. The little boy remained asleep against the blanket, his small face finally peaceful after hours of fever and confusion. Vanessa stood beside the open car door with Marcus's military coat wrapped around her shoulders while the federal agents quietly stepped back to give the family space. The flashing patrol lights still painted red and blue reflections across the wet pavement, but the energy of the scene had completely changed. The tension was gone now. What remained felt heavier. Officer Daniel Reeves stood motionless near his patrol car, watching the family in silence while water dripped from the edge of the awning behind him. Officer Kevin Morales remained nearby with his hands resting at his sides, no longer sure where to look. Ethan Cole had disappeared back inside the convenience store entirely, unable to face the parking lot anymore. Marcus adjusted the blanket around Caleb one last time before gently closing the rear passenger door. He rested his hand against the roof of the sedan for a moment, breathing slowly in the cold air. Then he turned back toward Vanessa. "You ready to go home?" he asked quietly. Vanessa nodded at first, but her eyes drifted toward Reeves standing alone beneath the flashing lights. Something in her expression changed. Marcus noticed immediately. "Vanessa," he said softly, "you do not owe anybody another minute tonight." She looked down briefly at the wet pavement reflecting the patrol lights around their feet. "I know." But she still did not move toward the car. Reeves watched her uncertainly as she slowly stepped away from the sedan and walked back across the rain-soaked concrete toward him. Every federal agent nearby tensed slightly, waiting to see what she would say. Reeves straightened instinctively, guilt already written across his face before she even reached him. Vanessa stopped several feet away beneath the cold glow of the gas station lights. Up close, Reeves could finally see how tired she truly looked. Her sweatshirt sleeves were still damp from the rain. Strands of wet hair clung against her cheeks. The exhaustion in her eyes carried something deeper than anger. It carried disappointment. Reeves lowered his head slightly. "Mrs. Brooks," he began quietly, "I owe you an apology." Vanessa listened without interrupting. "I made assumptions tonight that I should not have made," Reeves continued. "And your family paid for it." The wind moved softly through the parking lot while distant trucks rolled along the dark highway beyond the station. Nobody else spoke. Reeves swallowed once before continuing. Your son should never have been frightened like that. Vanessa looked toward the sedan where Caleb slept safely inside. No, she answered softly. He should not have. Reeves nodded slowly, shame tightening across his face. I thought I was doing my job. Vanessa studied him for a long moment beneath the flashing lights. Then she asked quietly, do you know how many people have said that to me before? Reeves could not answer. She looked away briefly toward the empty highway. When I was 16, a department store employee followed me through every aisle because he thought I would steal something. Her voice remained calm. When I was 23, a neighbor called the police because they thought I did not belong in my own apartment complex. Reeves lowered his eyes further with every word. Vanessa continued softly. Tonight my son watched armed officers surround his mother because she looked suspicious driving her own vehicle. The rainwater beneath their feet reflected the red and blue lights like broken glass. You saw a black woman standing alone at night, Vanessa said quietly. And before you knew anything about me, you decided I was dangerous. Reeves closed his eyes briefly. You are right. Vanessa looked at him carefully then. Not with hatred. Not with triumph. Just honesty. The painful part is not that you stopped me, she said. The painful part is that Caleb saw it happen. The word settled heavily into the cold night air. Morales turned away slightly, unable to hide his discomfort anymore. Reeves looked toward the sleeping child inside the sedan. I am sorry, he said quietly. I truly am. Vanessa studied his face for a few seconds longer before something softer entered her expression. Do you have children, Officer Reeves? He nodded once. A son. Vanessa paused. How old? 8. She looked toward him carefully now. Then you know how children remember fear. Reeves swallowed hard. Yes, ma'am. Silence settled between them again while the wind moved through the gas station lights overhead. Then Vanessa did something nobody standing there expected. She stepped closer and gently handed Reeves Caleb's small stuffed bear that had fallen onto the wet pavement earlier beside the SUV. One stitched eye hung loosely from the old toy. This belongs to my son, she said softly. Reeves took the bear carefully with both hands like it weighed far more than fabric and cotton. Vanessa looked at him steadily. Tonight he learned something from all this. Reeves stared at her uncertainly. What was that? Vanessa glanced toward Caleb sleeping safely inside the sedan before answering. He learned that even when people judge you unfairly, you do not lose your dignity by staying kind. Reeves looked down at the stuffed bear in his hands while the flashing lights reflected across the soaked pavement around him. His voice nearly disappeared when he finally spoke again. I do not know if I deserve that kind of grace. Vanessa pulled Marcus's coat tighter around herself against the cold wind. Maybe not, she answered softly. But somebody once gave it to me too. Then she turned quietly and walked back toward her family waiting beside the black sedan while Officer Daniel Reeves remained standing alone beneath the fading rain, holding a child's worn stuffed bear in trembling hands. The black sedan pulled slowly away from the gas station beneath the fading mist, its red taillights glowing softly against the wet Texas highway before disappearing into the darkness beyond the overpass. The government SUVs followed behind in silence, engines low and steady, until only the distant hum of traffic remained beneath the cold night sky. For the first time in nearly an hour, the gas station became quiet again. The flashing patrol lights still reflected across the puddle scattered around the pumps, but even those colors seemed dimmer now, less certain. Officer Daniel Reeves remained standing exactly where Vanessa Brooks had left him, the small stuffed bear still resting in his hands. Water dripped steadily from the edge of the awning nearby, tapping softly against the pavement in slow, uneven rhythms. Officer Kevin Morales walked over carefully, stopping beside him without speaking at first. Reeves stared down at the worn bear with the loose stitched eye hanging crookedly from its face. I scared that little boy, he said quietly after a long silence. Morales glanced toward the empty highway where the convoy had disappeared. Yeah, he answered honestly. Reeves nodded slowly as if hearing the truth out loud made it heavier somehow. The cold wind moved through the station again, carrying the smell of rain, gasoline, and wet concrete beneath the bright fluorescent lights overhead. Inside the convenience store, Ethan Cole quietly locked the front door and switched the sign to closed even though the station normally stayed open all night. He avoided looking outside. Morales rested one hand against his duty belt and watched Reeves carefully. "You did not know who she was," he said after a moment. Reeves gave a small bitter laugh with no humor in it. "That is the problem." Morales stayed silent. Reeves looked down again at the stuffed bear. "The moment I found out who her husband was, everything changed." The words hung heavily in the cold air between them. "But she was the same woman the whole time." Morales lowered his eyes toward the wet pavement. Neither officer spoke again for several seconds. Somewhere far across the highway, thunder rolled quietly through the clouds one final time before fading into the distance. Reeves slowly walked toward the SUV Vanessa had been driving earlier. Federal agents had already cleared the scene, leaving the vehicle parked beneath pump number 3 waiting for secure transport. Rainwater still clung to the windows while soft reflections from the patrol lights slid across the dark paint. Reeves stopped beside the rear passenger door where Caleb had sat frightened beneath the blanket. He could still hear the little boy's voice in his head asking his mother if the police were mad at them. 7 years old. Reeves closed his eyes briefly. His own son was 8. He pictured Tyler sitting in the back seat of his wife's car surrounded by flashing lights while strangers questioned her in the rain. The thought hit him hard enough to make his chest tighten. Morales quietly approached the SUV beside him. "Dispatch already informed the captain," he said carefully. Reeves nodded once without reacting. "I figured. There will probably be an internal review." Reeves stared at the reflection of the patrol lights sliding across the vehicle door. "There should be." Morales looked at him for a moment before speaking again. "For what it is worth, she could have made this a whole lot worse for you." Reeves looked down at the stuffed bear still resting in his hands. "I know." The station remained silent except for dripping water and distant truck engines rolling through the night. Then Reeves noticed something tucked partly beneath the rear tire of the SUV. He bent down slowly and picked it up from the wet pavement. It was a folded piece of paper softened by rain. Morales leaned closer while Reeves carefully unfolded it beneath the overhead light. It was one of Vanessa's counseling appointment reminders from the military hospital. Several handwritten notes covered the back in blue ink. Reeves recognized children's names listed beside appointment times. Military families. Trauma sessions. Emergency callbacks. At the bottom corner, one sentence had been written separately in slightly faded ink. "People heal faster when they feel safe." Reeves stared at the sentence for a long time without speaking. The flashing lights reflected faintly across the damp paper in his hands. Morales looked away first. Reeves folded the paper carefully and slipped it into the pocket beside the stuffed bear. Then he finally reached up and turned off the flashing lights on his patrol car. The sudden darkness felt almost shocking after so much noise and color. The gas station returned to ordinary light again. Quiet. Still. Human. Across the empty parking lot, Ethan Cole stood alone behind the convenience store window watching silently through the glass. Reeves noticed him for only a second before looking away. Some shame did not need words. Morales opened the passenger door of his patrol car slowly. "You heading home?" Reeves stared once more toward the highway where the Brooks family had disappeared into the night. "Yeah," he answered quietly. "I think I need to." He walked toward his patrol car carrying the small stuffed bear carefully in one hand while cold wind swept through the empty gas station around him. Water still shimmered across the pavement beneath the fluorescent lights, reflecting broken fragments of red and blue that slowly faded away into darkness. Somewhere beyond the highway, Vanessa Brooks was finally taking her son home. And standing alone beside the quiet pumps under the cold Texas sky, Officer Daniel Reeves realized that the most powerful person he met that night had never been the 4-star general at all.